Hi, welcome to Awkwardly Awesome. My name's Regan, and I've got my friend Logan here with me tonight, and we're gonna just have a quick chat, or maybe not such a quick chat, about censorship. In this day and age of people sharing information and literature and technology and their opinions, frankly, all over the place, it seems that the freedom of speech and the freedom of communication, or in Canada here, we call it freedom of expression, has been kind of stepped on. It's one of the things I'd like to start with here. I took down a couple of quotes. They're not exactly quotes from friendly people, but they are influential people, especially in the last 100 years or 70 years, whatever. Joseph Stalin said that words and ideas are infinitely more powerful than guns. And if we would deprive our opponents of guns, it is only right that we should take away their words as well. I think the exact quote was, "We would not let our enemies have guns. Why would we let them have ideas?" And that just seems to resonate quite a bit with what's going on today. Adolf Hitler also said, in relation to the political decontamination of our public life, the government will embark upon a systematic campaign to restore the nation's moral and material health. The whole educational system, theater, film, literature, the press, and broadcasting, all these will be used as a means to this end. And now neither of these guys are particularly popular in a free society, but these ideas seem to be more popular than ever. In a day and age when you can silence someone with a click or two of the mouse button and marginalize them in that way, it seems like more and more people are taking that option. So I guess the question I'd like to ask is, who has the right to silence someone else, or to determine who can say what?
Ultimately,
What do you think about that, Logan?
yeah, that's no one, Regan. Nobody has that unless it's talking about you choosing to silence yourself from a personal choice. That is the only thing that applies to us as human beings. There's not a single person on this earth, in my opinion, that has the ability to rightfully silence another person. And it's astonishing that we have come to this point.
Well,
and
I
it
think
feels like it arrived so quickly. Go ahead.
I think they have the ability, but I don't think that they have the right. You know, like when you choose to silence somebody else, you are trampling on their rights.
Agreed. Now,
have you ever experienced? Have you?
Go ahead.
Have you experienced that kind of? Yeah, sorry, we're dealing with the lag here, so
That's okay.
I'm gonna see if I can cut off. I'm gonna see if I can switch over to my mobile data, and hopefully,
Okay.
Yeah, it should do all right. There we go.
We good?
Yeah, I think so. I had to switch back to the Wi-Fi data, my mobile data out here. It's not dark enough yet. Out where I do, the cellular service only gets really good after dark during the summer and during the warmer months. So yeah, we're just gonna have to deal with the lag and give each other a little bit of space. And sorry to anybody watching this. There will be gaps between what we say, because we got to make a little bit of space for the limits of technology.
Yeah. So to your point, to your question, you had asked if I'd experienced anything like that as far as censorship goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, almost everybody has in this day and age. Everybody's been blocked, at least by somebody. I mean, I blocked people who really bothered me and were kind of wrecking my experience online.
I'll take it back a little further than that, man. Think about this. Think about even when you were a little kid, there was always somebody that I felt like was maybe not trying to censor, but I feel like it's in our nature, some of us anyhow, to at least try and discredit folks, which I think is a form of censorship, especially if the person's in the right and what they're sharing is factual and true, right? So, gosh, I mean, whenever you ask me if I experienced it, I mean, my instant thought was almost back to the playground in elementary school. I think that's where it began for some of us on what we've experienced. And I wonder if we're experiencing it on the playground, I'm wondering if that isn't somewhat of a taught or a learned behavior through some other method of programming that we've experienced that we didn't realize.
Yeah, I think it comes to the character. I think it's a character issue. People with
Sure.
weak character and who don't have the ability to defend their ideas in an intellectual fashion tend to just
Hmm.
try and make you shut up, right?
Oh,
You know,
100%. Yeah.
and in fact, that was straight from the playground. It's, you shut up. No, you shut up, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the level of discourse that often happens nowadays. It's like,
Yeah.
if people don't like you, they just cancel you, right?
It comes from an inability to communicate, to effectively
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or maybe not even an inability, but just not wanting to. You're choosing
Yeah.
the what I would call the easy route, the lazy route, the unjust route, and that's to silence someone instead of hearing their opinion and actually considering what they say. Instead of just trying to silence. So, and it comes from agendas. It's all agenda. I feel like most of it's agenda driven today. I mean, I've experienced it on social media, although I try to just stay away from those hot buttons. But at the same time, here, especially here lately, with the current issues that are going on here in the States, and then also, I mean, what I see in Canada seems to be an absolute nightmare, and I feel for you guys. But it's definitely agenda driven for sure. That's very apparent in this current scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the inability to express one's ideas. I mean, you can feel something in your heart and not be able to say it properly. It happens to me all
Oh,
the time. You know,
sure.
I'll think something up and come up with the perfect thing, of how I feel on the subject, and then open my mouth and it's like, "Ah!" this awful sounding trash falls out of my mouth, right? And it's
Right.
yeah, and I don't feel proud of what I say. So in a situation like that, it's easy to get embarrassed and just to say, no, just stop talking. Let's not do this.
Yeah.
And you just no, don't you say anything. Like, I'm right still because my thought was brilliant, but I just can't say it, and that's not good enough. We're adults, we're grown up, we're supposed to be able to communicate, and they say if you can't explain something that you're thinking, then you don't actually know what you're talking about. And
To a point, I could see
if you
that.
don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't. If you don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't be trying to convince somebody else of how right you are.
Yeah, that's they and I honestly, man, I mean the way you see things now, what's currently in our current climate, um, it's to the point now where it is. I would even say just it's to the point where it's 100% nefarious. It's to the point without a care in the world. The silencing that's going on is completely lacking in compassion of any type of compassion that you could ever experience. It's about as cold hearted as it gets. It's to the point of
Yeah, I
you
fully agree.
if you even lean a certain way on a number of topics, you don't even get the opportunity to air your voice. It's just instantly licking the fingers and snuffing the match just as fast as possible.
Yeah. I have a very central position, especially on politics and almost any topic. My moon sign is a Libra, and I'm all about balance and taking that middle road, the center path. And when you do that, all it does is it makes anybody on the left or the right consider you to be an idiot. They
And also
they tend to
assume that
think that
you're
you're
on the other side.
wishy-washy.
Yeah. Or they'll just if you're not on
Exactly.
their side, then you automatically have, it goes, and then here we are, we've already evolved to talking about the established dichotomy that for some reason we all just feel comfortable sitting in one bucket or the other. I don't know why it has to be divided into a dichotomy, but it sure as hell is. So but if you're not
Yeah,
one team, then you're automatically assumed to be on the other and therefore need to be silenced. And it's insanity.
yeah. I got into it a lot with one of my best friends from childhood, who, when I started criticizing, he's very left-leaning, and I love him to death. He's a great guy, but he's very left-leaning. And he immediately assumed when I criticized the slightest thing about the left principles that I was far right.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, and I'm not, you know, like I said, I live in a very, you know, here in Canada we call the Republicans conservatives. I live in a very conservative community. And if I try to talk about the things that are deeply held to me, you know, which I believe to be valid solutions, because they take the strengths from both sides and try to, you know, I believe working together is what's really going to bring people forward, rather than if you got two people and they're, you know, it's just like having a bad alignment on your car. If one wheel's pointing this way and the other wheel's pointing this way, all you're going to do is burn off the rubber in the middle, and you're wrecking your vehicle, you know, like it's as a tireman, I used to see it all the time. You know, people don't think of how much rubber can affect steel, but rubber bends and it flexes, and it puts a constant pressure on those steel pieces as they move with each other. They wear each other out. And I find that's what's happening a lot in the political system and the political dichotomy, is rather than making any kind of progress, they just spend all their time working against each other.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think? I got a question for you. Why do you think that us peasants, why do you think we become comfortable with censoring our fellow person? Why is that becoming
I think it's laziness.
Okay, go on. What do you mean by lazy, though?
It's intellectual laziness, rather than like we said earlier, rather than hearing somebody out, listening to the merits of their argument. Most people cut off. In fact, in my last video that I did, I talked about how I used to have that problem talking with people at the bar. As you come out with a detailed position, and they listen to about a third of it, and then they say, well, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And that just happens all the time.
You know, that's funny that you use the
people
term
are just too impatient.
Yeah. You use the term intellectually lazy. And what's really funny is, not 2 weeks ago, I was on the phone with a very good friend of mine, and we were talking about this same, not so much censorship, but why we are so quick to basically just dismiss each other without hearing each other. And it's funny because I actually call it morally lazy. And I think it's funny that you
Right.
basically call it the exact same thing I do. We each just have a different word for it. And you and I have never really talked in depth on this before, but yet we literally both call it the exact same thing. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think it's actually two leaves of the same branch.
Yeah.
You know, like morally lazy and intellectually lazy. I think they go right together, you know, each being slightly different, yet still fitting together perfectly and coming off the same tree.
More or less, yes.
What do you think? What do you think the factors are that cause people to decide whether a message should be silenced? You know, I've got a few things written down here, like comfort and convenience and safety. Safety in the quote marks, because you know, a lot of people in the name of safety will shut you up, right?
Right, but I think that even on top of that, it starts with influence. Because I really think that a lot of these things that people are barking and screaming about, if they didn't hear it on the television or the radio first, I don't think they would be saying anything at all. So I really think it starts with the influence and the programming and the propaganda. I feel like that's one of the beginning pieces of it. And now the fact that the propaganda and the influence is really, really psychologically specifically tailored to certain demographics, to the point where one message can uproot an entire demographic and have them in the streets ready to burn a place down. That's how advanced it's become.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a lot of it has to do with education as well. You know, like not to throw the entire universities under the bus, but I know when I was even in 7th grade, one of the guys, he's a really great guy out in my community here. He was kind of goofing off in class, and the teacher said, you know, hey, you're going to have to shape up. You couldn't do this. You couldn't behave like that in university. And he laughed at her and he said, I'm not going to university. He said, I'm going to be a truck driver. My dad's a truck driver. He makes good money. He always has work. I'm going to be a truck driver. And the problem with the educators that we have is all of them went to university.
Yes.
So if they're going to tell you anything from their personal experience, It's that you have to go to university in order to get a decent job, because that's the reality that they're living.
Correct.
And it seems to me that there isn't enough influence to help these guys who are not scholastically inclined and who will do those types of useful jobs. Nobody would eat a single thing if it weren't for truckers.
Mm-hmm.
And yet truckers are often kind of thrown under the wheels of the truck, as it were, as being simple or stupid or uneducated, unenlightened.
It's not glamorous enough.
Things like that. Yeah. And they don't, they dress in rough and ready clothes, because you can't dress in a shirt like this if you're going to drive a truck.
No, you're going to get fifth wheel grease on your load.
Everywhere. You're going to be filthy. Yeah. Then you're going to look like a slob in a white shirt, right? Yeah. You can't win. So they have to wear rough and ready clothing to deal with the realities of their job. It used to be that doctors wore a long black frock coat so that the blood stains wouldn't show on it when they were going from customer to customer or patient to patient.
Yes. Correct. Great.
Another couple things here that I have written down for reasons that people use to dictate whether someone should be silenced is popular opinion.
Yeah.
People seem to think that just because most people say it means it's right. But 100 years ago, most people would have told you that cars will never take off. Cars will never catch on because it's just too much trouble.
Yeah.
Wow, how are you going to have horses on the road? Buggy whips are never going to go out of style. How are you going to urge your team down the road? And most people thought that. Orville and Wilbur Wright's father, I think in 1901, said everything that's ever been invented everything that could be invented has been invented at this point.
Yeah, they shut down.
Obviously, we've come a long way past that. Yeah. He said the patent office shouldn't even exist anymore because we have everything.
Yeah. I honestly think that was probably a power move by the elites to just make us stop thinking and stop coming up with stuff. Almost like a suppress.
Yeah, and trying to remove incentive for people to, the Henry Fords of the day. Henry Ford worked 12 or 16 hours a day.
Yeah,
in a foundry, and then came home, and in his off time, he invented the car.
Yeah, they don't want you taking advantage of a free market.
No, they like it to be free as long as they're the ones controlling it.
Yeah,
which
free to them.
Kills the whole idea of a free market right there.
Yeah, it's free to them and not to us. Yeah, right. And then there's censorship in that as well.
Corporate interests. Yeah, exactly. I find corporate interests are another thing that, they say, well, it's just not good for business, so don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, innovation isn't good for business. You can invest your entire $1 billion into something that has no future, and that's bad for business. But as long as you make sure that you don't have any competition, then you can succeed. And, you're going to stifle new ideas. I mean, I'm perfect example of that. When I first heard of having a camera on my phone, I thought that's the stupidest thing I could ever think of. I have a camera. Why would I need to have them combined? And now you wouldn't even think of, I bought my phone based on the fact that it had the best camera available in my price range.
There's a lot of people that do that. They'll buy it based on the camera specs. 100%. Yep. Another form of censorship I've noticed in business, and this is a very old story, and I can't say I actually remember the individual's name all that well, but you've heard about the guy that actually built the car that could run on steam, that could run on water. I can't remember what year.
Yeah, I did. I don't know.
He didn't.
I don't remember his name either.
He didn't survive, did he? Pretty sure he was taken care of. I
don't think so.
You get what? Okay, so that's another form.
Yeah.
Except that's a permanent censor. And we're going to remove.
Well, and that's the big business, or not big business, but that's like the big leagues of censorship.
Yeah. Correct.
When you get up to that level, And then, I mean, that's where governments just start to look like organized crime, really. You know, when if you can't cope with competition, even for your thoughts, like with Joseph Stalin, he said, we don't want people to have ideas because, I mean, how are you going to keep in control? You know, basically is what he was saying. You can't have people talking about new things if you want them to be doing the old thing.
Wasn't Stalin also the same guy that plucked the feathers off the chicken and then started feeding it to show people that you can do something, you can do whatever you want to somebody below you and they're still going to follow you as long as you're their supply for sustenance and survival?
As long as you throw them a few crumbs.
Yep. I got some crumbs.
And, you know, nowadays it kind of seems that what they're really looking for is to create cookie cutter people. You know, we slam the cookie cutter down and out comes somebody who just does the same thing as everybody else. But I don't think that's the best for a society. You know, I mean, maybe it's good for an army. You want an army to be like that because if one guy's like the next guy, you can get them all to go in the same direction. You can get them to all kind of think the same. And that's a big part of basic training is they try to break down the individual and form them into a unit, right?
Yep. That's what they do. That's exactly what they do. I just don't think that has the same value in civilian society as it does in the army. No, and it doesn't have the same effect either because it's not the same situation. The civilian society shouldn't be a life and death scenario where you have to pile together as a unit. Civilian society, when you compile together as a unit, it's for fellowship and to build and to grow together.
Yeah.
Not, you know, so to your point, I agree. I mean, for them to try to implement that in civilian society, it's not going to work like they think it's going to work. You spent, I say you, they, I mean, it's just from the 60s on, you had nothing but movement after movement after movement of individuality. And I'm going to be this because I can be this. And the whole hippie movement, that's what that was behind was I'm not going to be what Big Brother wants me to be. I don't want to be an Eisenhower baby anymore. I want to be whoever. And granted, some people took it off the deep end, but whatever, you're going to get that in any spectrum. So it's kind of crazy how it's almost like the government empowered it in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, God, we went off the rails in the 80s. But now they're trying to clip the wings back in, but it's like, no, we're full spread. You can't clip a full spread on a Phoenix. Like this ain't gonna work.
Right. And it's like it's like they're trying to take that full spread and repackage it and give it back to us in a controlled fashion. They're like, well, no, you know, you can be whatever you want. You can just, all you have to do is say that you're something different and everybody has to go along with that. But the truth is, you know, if you're trying to convince somebody else that you are what you say you are, and say it has nothing to do with them, you've cut out half of the equation. If you're looking for acceptance from somebody else, it is about them. Because you have to meet them where they are. You can't force them to come where you are and drag them along. You have to meet them where they are and deal with them in that fashion.
Yeah, I think what some of those groups are failing to understand is you can say you're a freaking Ford truck, like I'm good, whatever, it's cool, I don't care. But the minute you tell me that I've got to acknowledge it as well, for one, you're openly saying that you do value my opinion because you're wanting it. You're wanting me to conform my opinion to what you want. So you do place value on it. But the part we're missing is that, gosh, I lost my thought. I feel like the part we're missing in that is that you need to understand that if you're going to place value on something, that you might not always be able to obtain what you're looking for. There's two sides to every coin. You know, just because you want somebody to accept your thoughts so badly, but how do you know that other person doesn't want people just to understand where they come from equally as badly?
Yeah, it's just like panning for gold. You can go out there and fill your pan with material and shake it and wash it and pan it off. But if the gold isn't there, you don't get the value for the effort that you put in. And
Right.
that's just, that's happening very often. A lot of people are panning and streamed with no goal when it comes to making other people accept their views. And then when they don't get acceptance, then they silence them.
Yeah,
And they resort back to name calling. Well, you're a bigot, you're a Nazi, you're a communist, they instantly want to throw names at you rather than trading ideas with you.
Sorry, I had to plug in.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
I was starting to lose battery and I had to make sure that I could get back in power. But no, to your point, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the mentality, not so much of the government, the powers that be. I don't have a hard time understanding them because they're being very obvious about their work they're trying to accomplish. There's no question in my mind about wrapping my head around their logic because I get it. It's nefarious as hell and I don't like it, but I do understand it. So there's really no questions on that. What I can't wrap my head around is us at the civilian level, why we feel the need to control another person's thoughts and actions so badly all of a sudden. And it's just the need to conform your neighbor. And I can't wrap my head around why that's so prevalent.
Well, I think it comes into one of the things I've been doing lately to understand people and where they're coming from is I look at their base reaction or their base emotions in a situation like that. And most often I've found when people behave like that abruptly and whatever towards other people, it's based out of fear. People who love to control, like the guy who always has to drive the car, he's afraid. He's afraid. He's not like, he's like, no, I'm an excellent driver. But he's actually afraid of not holding the wheel.
Yeah, that is a hell of a good point. You're afraid of letting loose and actually letting it flow naturally. You're afraid because you can't control the outcome. Yeah. That's a fantastic point.
And that's all rooted in fear.
Yeah.
When people are behaving in a fearful fashion, you can't trust them. With the fire in a theater, everybody acts out of fear. And the guy in the front of the pack who gets to the door first gets pressed against it and crushed because the people behind him are too afraid to do anything intelligent.
Steamrolled. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. And then it doesn't help you. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it doesn't help that a lot of these folks that are operating on that fear is being produced from someplace else and implanted into their psyche. That fear has a different source. And it reaches them, comes in them, goes inside them, grows its own fire, starts burning on its own, and then the result is the outlash at your fellow person.
Yeah. And one thing we've always been taught is if you can divide, then you can conquer. And when you break people up into these smaller little groups, and fear is the best way to do that, the communists don't want you to be able to feed your family with your own abilities. The Nazis, they want to take everything from you, and or the right-wing people, they want to take everything. They're greedy, and it's always based out of fear. Fear of lack, fear of not fitting in, fear of being viewed as an outsider. Fear is used to control. It's such a powerful. That's why they have the velvet gloves with the iron fist. You can use the velvet glove now and then, but you want to make sure you got that iron fist in there to get your point across.
Yep.
And anyone who tries to use one or the other generally tends to fail.
Maybe not immediately, but in time, yes. And I think the reason sometimes it takes these societies these groups of folks that are trying to enforce these just really, really, really constrictive lifestyles and ways and ideals. I think that they're successful in the beginning because naturally as humans, we're compassionate and I don't think we're naturally extremely combative. I think we want to be happy. At heart, we want to be peaceful. So we do put up with this stuff for a while, but at the same time, every time this has been tried, that society or some societies hit its tipping point and somebody has stepped in and ended it. The unfortunate side of that is all the bloodshed in between.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anything that gets set up that people hate badly enough usually tends to find a torch under it before too long.
Yeah,
And
the
it
unfortunate side just
doesn't
takes
stand up to that very
takes
well.
a little longer than what we'd like, though. That's the thing. Um, on a positive note, though, I think the digital age, don't get me wrong, the digital age has ushered in a new way to push propaganda for sure. But the digital age also works on the other side. It's a double-edged sword, right? So those of us that are trying to spread truth and light and bring folks together, we've got that same tool to use. You know, you and I both know people that are very good at that, and we tune into them weekly, if not daily, right? Because they're doing the right things. They're using that same tool against these people to push the truth, to bring light, to bring people together, and to really just fix this freaking problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're doing that, we have to make sure that we do maintain that edge of compassion, though. Because if you're calling someone a fucker or a baby eater, you can't reach them. They're not going to say, "Oh, wait, you're right. I am a baby eater," and be like, "You know what? You got me." Like, you need to be able to bend that around.
Yeah. You gotta. There's an angle. There's an avenue. For sure. And
I mean, I've spent enough time being angry in my life, knowing that you can't convince people of how right you are when you're angry.
Yes. Yeah, it's very difficult. And I think that
you can't. If you try to say, like, look how angry I am, you should be just as angry too. People tend to find that once again you're censoring them in a different way. You're censoring them emotionally.
Yep. Yeah, you're guilt tripping them into conformity. Why aren't you mad about this?
Yeah.
I'm infuriated. If you're not mad about this, your silence is deafening.
Yeah, exactly. It's and another thing that I find counterproductive is that people will talk about the things that need to be done, but they will only really talk about it in a room where everybody's agreeing with them.
Yeah, it's the whole birds.
And if everybody agrees with you, you aren't convincing anyone. So you're wasting your time. It's like it's intellectual masturbation, really.
You're literally just sticking the needle in your arm, making yourself feel okay because you got a group around you saying that we're all right. Well, yeah, freaking heroin addicts lay together and shoot up together too. They feel like they're all right. Are they all right? No, it's the same thing. It's the same toxic mentality. You're going to sit around and sit in a group just to spew hate, and then everybody go home happy because they know that 8 other people that they shared the evening with, they all spewed the same hate together. So, oh, well, I'm not alone in this world.
It's the 1984 minute of hate. Everybody gets angry and rails at the bad guys. And, we call them names and we spit and we get outraged, and then we quiet down and go back to work. And we don't actually do anything about it.
Yeah. What's crazy is I was talking to a very good friend of mine often here stateside, known him for years, fantastic individual. He was he does a really good job, whether it's on social media or anything, that even if somebody's got a different view, he won't block them, he won't delete them, he won't do any of that. He'll keep them on there just for the sake of emotional maturity. And also, he actually keeps them on his feed because it's kind of good to see perspective from the other side, even if you don't have to interact with them. You can see what they post, you can see what they talk about, and you do get a different perspective, right? You don't even have to interact with that person as long as you keep them, whether you're in contact, friends, et cetera, et cetera. You can still have visibility to their viewpoints, right? So it's a good tool in that aspect. But this person brought up something he saw the other day. An individual was saying that now, here referring to here stateside, that now that things are coming back to normal, this was approximately 3 months ago, if you get what I mean. He said, "Oh, things are coming back
Yeah.
to normal. I can get all my friends back now." And I sat there and I thought, what? For one, it sounds like you were a really nasty person potentially to a group of number of people that you possibly disagreed with. Okay, so that's apparent. Two, what's going on in your mental workings that makes you think that regardless of how you behaved, now that things are like you like them to be, that everybody's just going to accept you back with open arms? I don't understand why people feel that way. That, well, okay, yeah, I got riled up for 4 years and I screamed and I defamed some people that I love and I really said some nasty things. But now that I feel like everything's okay now because the TV told me it was going to be okay, boy, I hope I get all my friends back. I mean, that's like such a toxic mentality. I don't know why. I don't know how we got there, man.
Well, I think it's just them once again mining fear. You know, the people who are telling us what to do on the television. That's what I like to think of it as, the television, right? It
Absolutely.
tells you what to see, tells you what to be. You know, it's they don't call it programming for nothing.
Right.
People are so willing to use force to enforce their viewpoints now. And you even silencing somebody, blocking them, whatever. And like your friend, I try to not block people. I'm off social media altogether now. I found it wasn't really great for my mental health, and I'd find myself face bickering with somebody by 11:30 in the morning, and just having this pointless conversation that only gets people angry. Never
Nobody
convince anybody
wins
of anything.
Nobody
and
wins.
And like one time I was talking with James Inman, who's a comedian, and he came out very loudly and said, nobody should have a gun. And I said, well, I don't know about that, James. That's a pretty strong statement. I think I need to have a gun. And he said, no, you're an idiot. You don't need to have a gun. And I said, well, I had a bear try to push through my door. I don't want to chase it off with a pointed stick. And as soon as one of the other guys who was in the conversation was like, whoa, Regan, you had a bear try to come in your house? I was like, yeah, and boom, I was blocked instantly. Before I even got to tell the guy the story, which was a pretty interesting little story about, I won't get into the details of it. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus.
You were getting ready to deflate.
You
were getting ready to pop his balloon with a valid reason to have a firearm.
Yeah. And I mean, somebody was leaving edible things outside. And so the bear got bold enough to try and push in through the door. And so, yeah, when you're dealing with a situation like that, having a gun is a great thing to do. You don't want to. I live 45 minutes away from the cops, and that's if they drive fast.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to sit there and hold the door shut for 45 minutes against a bear. We're talking like a 450-pound man of the forest who will eat you.
Well, that's what
our black bears here are a little smaller than that, but yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, it's more than what you can handle.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Like if a bear wants into your house, they don't really care what manner of lock you have on the door. They're coming through. I mean, I wasn't able to bring a gun to that situation, and I shouted and the dogs barked, and I mean, I had a sharpened stick, like I mentioned, but I sure didn't want to have to use it. Like, I would have far rather had some kind of a firearm and been able to defend myself appropriately.
Well, yeah.
And just because some people use guns inappropriately doesn't mean that no one should have one.
I mean, there's that. I mean, we could argue that till we're blue in the face as far as, what the human condition is and what the fact that we use way more things than firearms to be awful to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. They took away everyone's guns in England and suddenly stabbings and bludgeonings went up, through the roof.
Yeah.
British cops have to wear a stab-proof vest rather than a bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
That kind of shows that the problem isn't guns. The problem is people.
Yeah.
And when you take people away from being able to be trained morally. Yeah. And next it'll be socks with something hard in them. Like, you can't take away that anger from people's hearts
No.
by taking away their weapons.
You can't legislate hate away. You cannot remove hate with legislation.
No.
It cannot be done.
No.
It cannot.
We have hate speech laws here in Canada where if you say something that somebody else considers hateful, they can silence you. And like, freedom of expression went out the door a long time ago. You know, you're free to express yourself as long as it doesn't piss anybody off. Well, that's not freedom at all.
No,
I know people who get pissed off because you aren't wearing the same color socks.
So what's the fix? What's the fix to us, in your opinion? What's gonna spin us around in the right direction to where we stop behaving in the manner that we're currently behaving?
Well, I think it comes to education from an early age. Children need to be educated by their parents, because you can't, I said in one of my previous videos, you can't pay someone to teach your children your deeply held beliefs. Because if they're teaching your children something that they truly believe, they're going to teach your children their deeply held beliefs, right? They aren't going to honor what you want them to know. I mean, especially here in Western Canada, it's kind of a conservative or Republican bent over here. And people here are always getting upset with what is being taught in the school because it doesn't jive with the deeply held beliefs that their grandparents taught them or taught their parents. And those were the success strategies of the region. But all of a sudden, somebody goes to university, comes back to educate your children, and they had to conform to what they were taught in university in order to get the grades, to get their degree. And along the way, they started believing it.
Yep.
And those types of attitudes don't fit well. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's happened is we've had the professor at Yale swinging a bike lock at somebody. Well, because that person wasn't compassionate enough.
So swinging a bike lock, that's totally compassionate.
That's compassion, right? You're gonna I mean, that's another level of censorship, right? He's trying to go for the big leagues there.
I'd say he skipped straight to Gestapo status.
Yep.
Went from professor straight to Jesus, what year was that? When did that happen?
Oh, that wasn't that long ago. That was 5 years ago at the most.
That's fairly recent.
With the media being as controlled as it is, it might be hard to find that story, but it's out there. You know, I remember reading it. I remember seeing that guy. He's an older fella too. He's probably in his mid 40s to early 50s. You know, he wasn't a young man. He was old enough to know better. And he's out there attacking someone because they're a Nazi bigot. Like, you know, talk about your commies and your brown shirts, or, you know, like, or the black shirts and the brown shirts from Nazi Germany, you know, like, that's literally what it was. It was thugs in the street beating each other with improvised weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, that's no different. You can't, you know, they say lie down with a dog and come up with fleas. You can't sink to their level. I have a saying, you can't, oh crap, skip my mind. It's you can't win from the high ground if you go down to the low ground.
No, you wrestle with a pig.
You know, the high ground,
you're going to get dirty.
Yeah. And a lot of people seem to think that disagreement alone is enough to silence someone, but how can you learn and grow beyond the echo chamber that behavior generates? If everybody just says, it's like those Muppets from Sesame Street, you know, cow, yup. And that's what people seem to think is going to bring us
the red and
society,
the red and the blue, the pink and the blue with the big mouth flap, and there's like this blob alien body. Oh yeah, those guys are great.
Yeah. But it's like that's who they want us to be. They want us to have that kind of outlook on complex issues. You shouldn't have everyone agreeing if the issue is complex enough, because everyone, despite what they want to push on us, everyone has their own individual take on it.
It goes
It's
back
like
to the dichotomy, man.
it's
It's
like the
everything's a yes or a no, a red or a blue, an in or an out. That's
it's
one,
like the
two.
six blind men of the elephant. You know, each one of them saw or felt a different part of the elephant. If you haven't read that poem, I really recommend you check it out.
No, but I got the gist
It's
of it. But go
a
ahead.
parable
Yeah.
or whatever. Each one of them, the one guy feels the tail and says an elephant's like a rope. The other guy
Yep.
feels the side. He leans against the side. He says, no, it's like a wall. Another guy feels a leg, says it's like a tree. Another guy feels a tusk and says it's like a spear. And a trunk, it's like a snake. The ear, oh no, it's like a leaf or like a fan. Well, every one of them was correct in their own
Yeah.
limited perspective.
Yes.
And it's just egotistical to think that any one of us sees the entire picture. Unless you can be everywhere at once, you can't get the full picture. All you have is your perspective of it.
You know,
And
that
if you can't respect the person who has a different perspective, then you're going to end up hating him. People, if you can't respect him, then all that comes in next is hate and anger.
That reminds me of something, and I don't know if you caught this episode or not. It was something that Lindsay had said, and I think she said this before, and it really resonated with me when she said it, because I hadn't considered this before, but she said, how can you really be certain, absolutely 100% certain of anything?
If you are, you're being intellectually lazy, and you're probably lying to yourself.
Yeah.
When the people who generally tend to be absolutely certain, they absolutely know, they're manic. They're having a manic episode.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it could be that. And I try to look at the good side of it, of just maybe sometimes you can just be so passionate about something that I'm even going to say that some of these people probably do feel it in their heart because they're truly passionate about it, right? So I think some of that comes from a good place. I don't think it's all negative and nefarious. It's not. I don't think it's all iron fist kind of mentality of certainty and absolutes and this is how it is. I don't think. I mean, I think some of it does come from a good place, from passion, from excitement, from fear. But like I said, I don't think all of it is malicious in intent.
Well, and coming back to what you were saying earlier about what the solution is, I think a lot of people have not been trained to control their emotions.
Oh,
They've been trained to just let their emotions run wild and just go with it. Yeah, myself too. I've definitely had my problems with emotional control. In my last video, I actually talked about how I used to fight a lot, and you don't get in as many fistfights as I got in without lacking emotional control.
Sure.
It's as I got older, I got better at not going there and kind of stepping back a little bit. And that doesn't mean that, I definitely have a bit of a fiery disposition. And, even at the end of my video, I said, it's not that I'm never going to fight again. Yeah, I probably will, but I really bring it down to an absolute bare minimum now, because if I believe in something strongly enough, I will fight.
Right.
But I just try to make sure I pick my battles now.
Yeah, and then I think the older we get, we start thinking more about consequences instead of just right that second. I know that I definitely, as I progress later into my 30s, I'm not going to say I don't get as angry, but I definitely I view the consequences a lot clearer and a lot earlier now than what I used to.
I think another big thing that's lacking from the education of young people, and young people especially, is nobody really gets spiritual instruction anymore. I mean, just within the last year, I went on this big spiritual journey, and I gained all these tools, actually a bunch of them through courses that Lindsay either hosted or arranged for somebody else. And I went to like the Catherine's courses as well.
Yeah.
They were just amazing, and I picked up a bunch of spiritual tools there, which enabled me to distance myself from that visceral reaction, rather than just going for, just jumping in and immediately wanting to fight. I'll feel those feelings and I'll say, I don't like feeling this way. Do I have to feel like this? You know, am I
Yeah,
going to be a captive of my emotions?
it's a choice. Once
And
you learn
I
the
found a lot of
choice,
value in that.
yeah, I think something that helped me a ton was I started openly acknowledging that the way I was feeling, regardless of any external stimuli, it's still a choice, right? I'm still choosing to let this bother me. I'm choosing to let this eat at me. I'm choosing to be angry. I'm choosing to not be angry. It really once I it took me a while to figure that out, but it has improved my life exponentially knowing that regardless of what emotion I'm feeling, it is a choice. We're choosing it.
And being able to walk away from a situation having not convinced the other party of the rightness of your cause is a skill all in its own. You know,
Mm-hmm.
in my most recent social media bickering matches, I've definitely, you know, like if you go online and see them, you're going to see that I didn't put in the last word. I mean, even if the other person just said okay in a snarky manner, I was like, okay, I'm just going to walk away
Yep.
from this. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I'm a lunar Libra. I will argue anything to the death and about 15 minutes after that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a skilled debater. Um, and it's not always helpful, you know. If you piss somebody else off bad enough, they don't care whether you're right. They just think you're an asshole.
And depending on their mentality, they either want vengeance or want to censor you or maybe just disconnect altogether. And I'm not going to say that some folks
Another problem,
disconnecting may be healthy. I mean, there's healthy times to disconnect from something. So
absolutely. Another point that I've found, another tactic for censorship is when somebody's trying to engage you in a conversation, they'll talk past your point. You'll make a point and they will just pretend that what they're saying addressed your point when it actually had nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's like, you know, you say red is better than blue, and they'll say, well, purple is nice, and then pat themselves on the back and consider themselves a winner. When they didn't address either one of the things that you said, you know. I mean, and personally, I'm a purple is nice kind of guy, you know, like you blend the red and the blue and you get that purple. And, in that illustration anyway, that's where I sit where, you know, purple is nice. And I'm trying to blend the strengths of the two sides in order to bring out that blend of colors, whether it's, you know, yellow and blue to make green or red and blue to make purple. I just picked red and blue off the top of my head. But
sure.
If you're trying to have an intellectual discussion with somebody and they talk past your point, they didn't convince you of anything.
No, no. And I mean, and ultimately, I guess not every conversation needs maybe, I guess I don't feel like I need to convince people in every conversation. I think sometimes if we could just be okay with being heard and not feeling like you had to convince, man, think of the progress we could make just being okay with being heard instead of literally having
Yeah.
to win. We don't always have to win.
Yeah, being heard is really important. I know lots of times when I talk to people about the challenges that I face and living as secluded as I do and as alone as I do, people will, in fact, they try to silence you by coming up with a solution. They'll say, well, you should do this. And it's like,
Well,
you know, I don't want you to
maybe I
fix
don't
my
want a
problem. I
solution.
just want you to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
I
not
just want you to
asking for you
acknowledge
to
the fact that what I'm dealing with is difficult.
Yeah, I'm not asking for
You
you
know,
to
like, and I
solve the
don't want your
problem.
pity.
You know what I take that as is sometimes when they throw a solution at you, that's another way of saying, I don't want to hear what you're saying.
Exactly. That's one of my notes here is people
Yeah.
will, you know, they'll try to just get you to shut up, you know? Well,
Yeah.
here's your problem fixed. Now,
Well,
will you
here, do
shut up?
this. Fix. Now be quiet. I can't handle what you're bringing to me right now. I just can't.
And I suppose actually, as you say that, it kind of makes me think of husbands and wives talking, where the wife just wants to be heard, and the husband's trying to fix her problem. And in a way, it's kind of so he can shut her up. and not have to deal with this anymore. I
It
guess
could
it's
it could be
conversationally
that.
lazy.
Yeah, I mean, but then I guess now that you say that, there are people on the other side that genuinely feel like they have to save the world. So I think there's also a group of folks that feel that if they don't present a solution, then they are not helping, meaning it's almost like, because I've run into folks that just feel like they have to save everyone, and I feel like that may be part of like their own way of feeling significant. So I think there's the other side of it too, of folks that offer a solution, because if they don't, they're gonna feel like, oh my God, I'm not helping. I have to help. I have to help. I got to. So I think then that comes from a good place. I do think it does. So I think there's both in that situation.
It does. It does come from a good place, but at the same time, it might be, you might be biting off more than you can chew.
Oh,
Sometimes
sure.
you can't save everybody. You can only save the people who are willing to participate in their own salvation.
Yeah.
You know, if you try and grab a drowning man, he's going to drag you under, not because he hates you, not
No.
because he has any kind of problem. Maybe it's the Dalai Lama, who most people, accept as being a really great guy. But if he can't swim and you try to get too close to him, he's
I see
going
what
to
you did
grab
there.
onto you and try to pull himself up.
I see what you did there.
I have my own issues with all kinds of people
Well,
that are
sure. Yeah,
accepted as great
absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
I used to live right down the hill from a Mother Teresa mission,
You
and I
told
saw
me.
things happen there that I
Yeah, you
wasn't in
told me.
favor of. Yeah,
That was in Papua New Guinea, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the women ejected on my friend's wife had his baby on Christmas Eve, or no, Christmas Day, out on the beach because she was kicked out of the maternity ward over some vandalism to the church. And that was a Mother Teresa mission. It's
Yeah.
it was very sad, very, very sad. And those people, they paid for the vandalism and they went back to church there. Like they didn't turn on the church and burn it down. They just accepted that was what they had to do.
Oh, wow.
That was their best clinic around.
Yeah, I get it. Certain situations. Yeah. And I don't know the whole story, so I probably shouldn't comment on the rest because I don't know enough. So but yeah, to your point, gosh, where were we at before that? I kind of lost where we were.
Drowning people, pulling somebody down just because they're desperate.
Yeah. Like it doesn't always come from a bad place. Like for instance, the drowning. I mean, I think by that time we're running reptile brain and it's fight or flight. So I think for the folks that, for the drowning victims that happen to bring somebody else down too, I think that's just, you're not even making your own decisions at that point. That's the base core of your survival instinct coming in.
Yeah, and that's what they teach you in life-saving class too. They say, you never approach a drowning man from the front. You get in behind them, you throw a loose choke around them, and then stay at their back where they can't grab you and drag you down because they aren't going to help. But you can only help one drowning person at a time.
Oh, yeah.
You can't go out there and loop your arm around 4 of them because you're going to get one of them grabbed wrong and he's going to pull you under. And now there's 5 drowning people.
Yep.
So you really have to pick your battles when it comes to that, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's a tough call for sure.
I saw, a really good-hearted person the other day saying that their job is to wake the people up, wake up everybody. But 10 years ago, I started trying to do that. Yeah. I got out there, I was going to wake everybody up. And, if you try to wake up people who are determined to sleep, you're just going to piss them off. Yeah. They're going to roll over. They're going to turn their back. They're going to throw a kick your way and consider you to be the asshole. So you can only wake up people who are ready to wake up. I put a lot of effort into helping my parents come around to different subjects. And believe me, man, blood, sweat, and tears. There was all kinds of fights as they clung to their beliefs that they had grown up with and that they had formed. And, like if somebody is determined to stay asleep, and my parents are great. They've changed their opinions on so many different subjects. It's now pretty easy for us to have a harmonious discussion, and we agree more often than not. But they woke up. They were ready. Eventually, they were ready to wake up. And unless you have the energy to devote to relentlessly waking somebody up, it's not going to work.
Right.
And you can't wake up everyone.
Are you comfortable with talking a little bit about the situation in Canada?
Yeah, with the COVID jails, and
Just
I mean, that's what they're
the
calling them.
absolute tyranny.
And
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, man.
It's it's difficult because in this age of censorship, I could suddenly, I could lose half of my 26 subscribers.
I got you.
But no, I'm not going to be afraid of that, though. I mean, if people don't want to watch what I have to say because I disagreed with them, then they weren't my viewer in the first place. Because with a name like Awkwardly Awesome for the show, I'm going to be awkward. I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to make mistakes, and it's just going to be a thing. So yeah, right now, in Canada, our prime minister that we got, however many years ago, 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah, right.
He's very left leaning. He wants to save the whole world, and these days, I actually phoned his office here a month and a half ago. And, I didn't get to talk to him naturally. I spoke to an answering machine. But when they first started bringing these COVID detention centers or COVID screening centers, I don't know what you're going to call them, the ones at the border where you cross the border and they put you into a hotel for $2,000 for 3 days to determine whether you have COVID or not. My concern there was that you've basically trampled in Canada, we have what's called the common law right to travel. And it's for the common people to travel freely from one place to another without undue restriction.
Right.
And if you put a $2,000 bill on somebody who's coming home from Mexico, that's an undue restriction. Yep. I mean, it's not reasonable. You can't just throw it. I mean, then what you've done is you've restricted travel to only the wealthiest people who can afford to throw away $2,000.
Oh, so you can technically bond out and it doesn't matter. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, you have to pay, but you have to be able to afford. I mean, I don't know how you would, my uncle just got back from a trip overseas, and I don't know how he afforded it.
Oh, so you're basically saying no matter what, so so they not only do they send you into a government holding facility, but you're also mandated to cover the $2,000 Canadian to cover the expense.
Yep.
Oh my God.
And to be fair, it's a hotel. It's not, I'm not going to sit here and call it a Gestapo camp or whatever.
Okay.
But
thank you for clarifying.
Having had my own run-ins with the law, I can tell you being locked in a room, regardless of how nice it is, has a serious effect on your mental health.
Guaranteed.
It's not a comfortable position. It's not a good feeling. It's demeaning. And I knew this old guy who was spent time in prison, and he said in prison people read the Bible a lot. And I've never been able to find this verse, but he said they had this verse that the guys would quote to the guards. And it was about being paid to watch people is a curse. And I don't know what like I said, I haven't read the verse myself. So it might have been to do with spying on people. But the guys in prison, they were saying it to the guards. They were saying, well, you're paid to watch me. Therefore, your job, you're cursed by having that job. And I know that the one time when I was put in a cell, the cops, I'd been difficult with the cops, and they put the cuffs on really tight around my wrists. And the cuffs didn't come off for quite some time. And I ended up with these little, I've still got tiny little scars there where they wore my skin. And then I sat in the cells for a few days and it started getting infected. And I basically had to beg for a Q-tip with some polysporin on it to treat my injuries.
Jeez.
And they weren't going to give it to me at first. I had to work like, and I'm sure if I would have just been sitting there like a good boy and signing whatever papers they put in front of me, it probably would have gone easier on me. I'm not saying, you know, that they were maliciously trying to, you know, torture me or withhold my medical treatment, but it wasn't a, they weren't all laughs and smiles, that's for sure.
Right. For sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's so yeah, as far as the detention centers go, if you have an armed guard outside your room, and all these over sanitary procedures, and I believe that you know, forcing everyone to wash their hands repeatedly and douse their hands with alcohol every time they want to touch anything, I think that's bad for you on a health level.
It's destroying your skin
when I lived
biome.
overseas, it was a when I lived overseas, I was a very obedient child. My mom got this antibacterial soap, and she said, you wash your hands with that all the time. And I wash my hands all the time. And my brother, on the other hand, was a free-spirited child, shall we say. And he would look at the soap and imagine that he had washed his hands and call it good.
Yeah.
And guess who was the one who got sick all the time?
You.
This guy.
Yep.
I'm the one who got sick. Yeah. I couldn't catch a fish because the fish could smell the soap on my hands.
Yep.
And they stayed away from any bait that I would touch.
Yep.
My brother would be standing right beside me, pulling in fish left, right, and center. And I'm fishing the same hole he is, the same bait, with better fishing technique because I was older and I could cast further. And I watched, you know, I was a very careful child. So I was watching, you know, how to do it right. And I couldn't get any results because my hands were contaminating what I was trying to do.
Yep.
And I just think that I think it's overkill. You know, you can
100%.
you can go too far in the right direction. You know, if you've ever read a Stephen King book, I always think of like Eddie's mom. Eddie's mom from It.
Yes.
She was a good mom, but she was a good mom too far.
Yeah.
And she, you know, just by being so controlling, she demeaned her son's masculinity by making him into this little fearful extension of herself.
Well, she also lied to him and told him he had asthma and then gave him a placebo for years too. Yeah, because she was overcompensating. She wanted to, and she actually, in regards to that, she actually made her child sick because he would get reactions and think that he needed to have medicine when in fact it was all an anxiety attack that she had driven into him. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Is there a time limit on Zoom?
Not with two people.
Perfect. What else do you want to cover?
If there was another person here, we could only go 40 minutes, but
that's right. Oh, I saw that disclaimer when I launched
I got
it.
here. I've got
about 15 more minutes.
Another method. On. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Well, I find that censorship is just a weak excuse to control others. You know, it's I agree. Once again, it all comes back to being rooted in fear. And if you need to shut somebody up in order to maintain your own position, you're generally probably doing it out of fear.
Yeah.
Name calling. If you have to name call your opponent, isn't that just the equivalent of throwing a temper tantrum? I mean, It wasn't convincing on the playground. Why is it suddenly, you know, why can you just call somebody a bigot and shut them up now?
Yeah, I never understood.
And when you call them a bigot.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, when you call somebody a bigot, haven't you kind of stolen their humanity? You've reduced them down to just a simple, you know, aspect.
You've applied a label. I mean, look what happens in the media. I mean, if you're especially in terms of the media and then pre-trial, right? So let's say somebody is in a pickle and it happens to make it into the media. I mean, I've seen it time and time again. You know, we're living in here in the States in a country where you're technically innocent until proven guilty, which we all know it's the opposite. But if I've seen it time and time again. I've seen people that didn't even make it to trial yet, but they were basically convicted in the media. And then it was game over after that. So to your point, to the name calling, it's the same concept because I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there was a guy that just got fired from ESPN, I think this last week, because during his off time, he put something on Instagram with him and some strippers, right? So he was fired from ESPN. Okay. And I don't know. I didn't see the media coverage on it, but what I'm saying is all the media has to do is label him as a sleaze bag, and that's going to stay with him for the rest of his life.
Yeah. It's, I was saying to a police officer a while ago, I was having a peaceful interaction with him. I just went to the station. I'm trying to get a pardon. So, to kind of put my past behind me. And I went there to get fingerprinted for the pardon application. And for some reason, sexual impropriety came up in the conversation while we were waiting for the machine to take the prints and whatever. And I said, once somebody is a accused sex offender, they're practically a convicted sex offender.
Yeah.
Once people start talking about it, an accusation is almost as bad as the conviction.
And even anymore, it almost is
wrong,
a conviction. It's almost the equal as a conviction nowadays.
Yeah,
it really is. And don't get me wrong,
basically left behind the courts of justice, and we've entered into the courts of public opinion.
Yeah, and that's a touchy issue too, because there has been such a rampant problem with sexual abuse, right? So it's a huge problem, not just in my country, but all over the globe. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem across all demographics. I feel like sexual abuse is the one problem that literally touches almost every different demographic on this planet. So to the point of when you want to talk about the pendulum swing, right? Where for a lot of years, the pendulum swing was, oh, boys will be boys, and it just got brushed off. And then there became a whole millions of females and possibly males as well that were traumatized victims that didn't have a voice because the pendulum swing was on the side of the aggressor, right? Oh, I'll just brush it under the rug, we'll ignore it. Well, now we're in a pendulum swing to the exact other side, which is believe all women. That's not the answer either, because not everybody's honest, right? So to your point.
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say.
The problem with going all the other way to making this the age of consent is, in a big way, it kind of takes away that romantic moment. Like I know a lot of girls like somebody to kiss them without asking. If you have to ask somebody if you're going to kiss them before you try, you kind of ruined the moment for a lot of people. I've heard this from many people. It's, you can't sign a form to and bring the romance back into the moment. It's an emotional experience.
I get what you're saying. But at the same time, for that level of filtering and bubble wrap, I should say, to be applied, almost both people have to be in that mental state. Because I personally, in my years of dating, I've never ran into anybody that was like, I don't know, it always just flowed, I should say. I guess I was just always partnered with somebody where it flowed naturally, and I didn't have to worry, or neither one of us, I should say, ever had to worry about, is this person okay with what I'm about to do, et cetera, et cetera. So don't get me wrong, to your point, if you turn on the TV, it's going to be all sign this 45-page document before you go on your first date. I know that's extreme, but you get my point. But at the same time, I feel like I feel like my life, my entire experience in that has been the other side of the spectrum, where it's just, I mean, it's just kind of had a natural flow to it. So I think, to your point, don't get me wrong, what you're saying, it exists, because there are situations where people don't read the situation correctly, and then they do make improper advances. That definitely happens. But I also think that there's a lot of people out there that don't embody that mindset, and they do appreciate the natural flow of life in that aspect.
Well, even for myself, I've never really dealt with, you know, the improper advances. I've gone the other way, actually, in being kind of too shy to make that move.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just because I don't know. I mean, shyness, I guess being shy is in a way, it's its own form of conceit, because you kind of, rather than, you're thinking so much of your action, you tend to not, and I'm butchering this whole concept, but I've heard somebody else explain it much better before. But shyness is not being, it's not okay to be shy and say, well, I'm just shy, and I make this, that as an excuse for myself. Being shy means you're thinking too much about yourself, I guess, is what I mean is, and that's what makes it conceited.
It could be fear of rejection as well, which does center back to your own feelings of pain.
Well, there's that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess anytime I was shy, I felt like I was shy because either I didn't want to be rejected, or I didn't want to be perceived as someone that was being too aggressive with the advance. So that also kind of would dial me back a little bit. But I think they're both rooted in rejection.
Yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah, well, and like in my case, I was adopted, and I don't like to belabor the point, but there was deep-seated feelings of rejection right from birth. It's I have a fantastic memory. I can remember even just laying in the bassinet, not being able to even roll over, and seeing the nurses walk by, and after being given up by your mother, and then to have these people walk by, glance in on you, and walk away. There was a lot of feelings of rejection there. That's one of the challenges that actually Catherine helped me deal with, and even to just to recognize that was something that was affecting me, is that fear of rejection and those feelings of rejection kind of taking me to a place where I was devaluing myself just due to that entire experience.
Yeah, I hear good things about her. I need to eventually bite the bullet and get in on some of her classes. She sounds pretty rad.
Yeah, I think the price may have gone up, but I'm going to tell you, it's totally worth it. Whatever she's charging, go do it, because those classes are amazing.
Yeah, I've never heard anything.
I took 3 with her.
Yeah, I've always heard nothing but good things. Yeah, I think we're pretty fortunate.
One of the times, the first time I went to one of her classes, during the end of it there, she called a blessing down to help me deal with some of these feelings of rejection and abandonment, and feelings of lacking self-worth. And one of the images that she described was this giant white owl coming up behind me and wrapping its wings around me, and just healing me, with their own spiritual energy. And later on, when I took another, I think the most recent of her classes, what ended up coming up, it was a Meet Your Spirit Animal class. And the spirit animal that came forward for me actually was an owl. And so it was, it was particularly insightful. And ever since then, I've just been I've been all about owls. I mean, I always saw owls before, and I didn't think anything of it, but most people don't even see them, because they're so secretive, they're so silent.
Yep.
I got a video of one flying over top of me, and it was like a ghost. There was no sound. It just flapped and flew past me, and it flew right over top of my head. And I was videoing it, and I listened to it later. And I mean, one of my exes had a pigeon. When that thing flew across the room, it was like listening to a V8 with no muffler.
Yeah.
This thing was like loud. but the owl just, it floated like a ghost and just with
Yep.
unnatural flight characteristics. And I
That's
found a
really
lot of
cool.
interest, or a lot of similarity there. I mean, when I walk around, I generally walk on the balls of my feet. I'm very quiet when I walk. I've got big eyes. I see really well in the dark, and a big round head. Like, I've got a bunch of these owl feature things happening here, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. No doubt.
When I
One of
eat
my
when I
grandmothers, she
eat mice,
loved
I have to
owls.
puke up the bones later.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually hang tight. I'm gonna show you something, and then I gotta jump off here, but I'm gonna show you something real quick. Hang tight.
All right, cool.
I don't know how well you can probably see that okay, can't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
Right
see
there. I
what
can
it
see it
is?
good.
Yeah, okay, so this
Yeah.
I want to say I'm going to read the back, right? So it says this was my grandmother. She had it hanging up in her house for a long time. Said this surface print was lifted from a stone amulet found at Fountain Bar on the east bank of Rock Creek where it enters into the Columbia River. I think somewhere near Yellowstone, this was actually etched. And then they took a rubbing
Cool.
or they
Wow.
rubbed ink or something on it and then pressed the paper onto it. I'm sure she bought
Yeah.
it at a gift shop.
Cool.
But that's one of my favorite things from her. She loved owls. She had owls in different variations hanging through her house, and that one I want to say that was in Yellowstone. I'd have to Google Fountain Bar, Rock Creek, but the Columbia River. I mean, that's up in Washington, Oregon, in that area, I believe. So I believe the Columbia actually dumps into the Pacific in
Yeah.
Washington, right? Because I think they followed the
I
Oregon
think so.
Trail.
Yeah.
That Oregon Trail followed the Columbia River, I believe. Something along those lines.
I don't know. I actually never played Oregon Trail. And,
oh man,
you
you
know,
gotta catch
I had a really wide
dysentery,
range.
man.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah,
catch that
exactly.
dysentery.
I've seen the memes and
Yeah.
oh, no, thank you. I've had it for real. And,
Yeah.
it was terrible.
Yeah, they call that Taco Bell here in the States.
Yeah. 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 Right. When I lived overseas one time, my mom made this wonderful chicken meal, and I mean, that might not have been dysentery, but it was very similar. I ate this huge meal, and I just loved it. It was so good. And then later that night, I started feeling sick, and back then I had an aversion to vomiting, and so I didn't want to puke it up. So I was like, I'm just gonna let it pass. I'm gonna let it pass. And man, 3 days of torture,
Yep.
absolute torture. I didn't sleep at all. I would get about 40 minutes of sleep, and then I'd have to wake up and go to the toilet, and it was just
Man.
pure liquid. I mean, it was straight up dysentery. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just the worst experience ever. Like, so bad. And finally I
It's easy to
puked
get
it up.
dehydrated like that.
And yeah, I won't get into the details, but it was, yeah, I won't get into all the details of it, but my meal was essentially undigested. My stomach had just put it on hold and was like, no, this ain't going through.
Oh
And
wow.
it came up the way I had eaten it. And instantly I felt better. And I recovered quickly after that, after I got the bad out. But I guess
Kind of makes you
that's not even a bad place to close on here. Is, I think one of the things that we need to do as a society is we need to have that big puke. It's not pleasant and it's not a great experience, but you need to get the bad out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely, we need to have an emotional purge of all this negativity that we've been ingesting, because we definitely ingest negativity by the shovelful every day. And to your point, and I do need to hop off here. If you're open to it, I wouldn't mind talking to you again in the future about a little bit of what you mentioned on how, you know, what we kind of take in, how we need to vomit it out, but also how literally what we pay attention to, the attention that we pay literally is transmuted into currency almost instantaneously in the digital age. If you're willing to, if you want to talk about that in the future, that's something that Regan, your attention is worth money, and you can choose who gets your money by who gets your attention. And I think we need to be more cognizant of that.
Well, it's like I was saying to you, just one of the last times we talked. I said, you know, if we are talking about a subject that's negative without having any solution, you know, if we aren't willing to, like, say with pedophiles, if we aren't willing to actually get out and stop them from doing things by simply talking about that subject, we are giving it our attention. We're giving it psychic value, as it were, and it's not useful.
There's power in your words and power in your thoughts. 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Anyway, I guess we did kind of go all over the field here. We didn't stick too much to censorship, but
I knew we would.
It's one of those things. Yeah. No, and like you said, we have to talk again, because I love talking to you, and you've got a lot of great points to share, a lot of different perspectives. And so I know, you know, normally I just do these talks by myself, but having somebody else to work from and to share with is it's just comes back to what you said earlier about fellowship. You know, like we had a moment here, we talked. In Australia they call it mateship, but it's just, you know, people of like minds getting together, and even people of different minds getting together and discussing things and coming away richer for it.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on. I greatly appreciate it. I really do.
Oh, absolutely. We'll do this again. So anyway, in closing, I'd just like to say, try to listen to the people who have something different to tell you. You're never going to learn from somebody by shutting them up, and you're never going to increase your own value in this world by silencing somebody with a different opinion than you. You know, it's all about taking from both sides the strengths of two arguments, putting them together, and trying to come up with the strongest solution from your common ground. So on that note, I would hope everybody has an awkwardly awesome day. Remember, God loves you, and so do I.